The AI shrink will see you now.
Quite the image, isn't it?
It really is. What does an AI shrink even look like? We're actually diving into the results of a fascinating study today.
Yes, a randomized controlled trial. It was just published in the New England Journal of Medicine.
And it involved thousands of interactions, right? Between real patients and an AI shrink.
That's right. We're taking a deep dive into this research on a generative AI chatbot, specifically one designed for mental health support.
Okay. So our mission today is what? To figure out what this study really found.
Exactly. And, what these findings might mean for the future of mental health care, for getting support out there.
All right, so set the stage for us. What was the study trying to achieve? What was the big question?
Well, the core question was whether this specially trained generative AI chatbot, they called it Therabot, could actually effectively treat clinical-level mental health symptoms.
So not just if people like using it, but if it made a real difference.
Precisely. Did it lead to measurable improvements in people's symptoms? That was the focus.
And how did they go about testing that?
They ran a national randomized controlled trial, which is, a pretty rigorous design. They had 210 adults participate.
Okay. And these adults were dealing with specific issues.
Yes, they all had clinically significant symptoms. Either major depressive disorder, so depression or generalized anxiety disorder, GAD, or they were identified as being at clinically high risk for feeding and eating disorders, what they called CHR-FED.
Got it. So 3 distinct groups within the study. How were they divided up?
Right. They stratified by condition, and then within those conditions, participants were randomly assigned. Half got access to Therabot for 4 weeks.
And the other half?
They were the waitlist control group. So they didn't get the intervention immediately, which allows for comparison.
Standard procedure. And they measured things right after those 4 weeks.
They did. They looked at changes from the start, the baseline, to the end of the 4-week intervention. And then, importantly, they did another check-in at 8 weeks, so 4 weeks after the intervention ended.
To see if the effects lasted, presumably?
Exactly. They wanted to see if improvements held up.
So what were the main things they were tracking, the primary outcomes?
The main focus was the change in symptom severity for MDD, GAD, and CHR-FED using standard clinical questionnaires.
Makes sense. Were there other things they looked at? Secondary outcomes?
Yes. They also tracked how much people actually used Therabot, user engagement.
Yeah.
And how they felt about it. Things like acceptability and, critically, the therapeutic alliance.
Therapeutic alliance, like how connected they felt to the AI.
Kind of, yeah. It's about the perceived bond, trust, and agreement on goals, which is usually discussed in the context of human therapy.
Interesting. Okay, so let's get to the results. What did they actually find? Did Therabot help?
Well, the findings were pretty significant. The group using Therabot showed much greater reductions in symptoms compared to the waitlist group.
For all 3 conditions: depression, anxiety, eating disorder risk.
Yes, across the board. And this was true both right after the 4 weeks of using Therabot and still evident at the 8-week follow-up.
Can you give us a feel for the scale of improvement? Were the differences large?
They were substantial. For example, with depression symptoms at 4 weeks, the average score decrease in the Therabot group was minus 6.13 points.
Okay.
Whereas in the waitlist group, it was only minus 2.63. So more than double the improvement. And similar significant differences were seen for GAD and CHR-FA at both time points. The effect sizes, Cohen's d, indicated meaningful clinical differences.
Wow, that's actually quite striking. What about usage? Did people stick with it?
They did, yeah. User engagement was quite high. On average, people used Therabot for over 6 hours across those 4 weeks.
6 hours? That's a decent amount of interaction.
It is. And maybe one of the most surprising findings, the ratings for therapeutic alliance.
The connection people felt.
Right. Those ratings were comparable to what you often see reported in studies with human therapists.
Really? Comparable to a human therapist?
That's what the data suggested, yeah. High ratings on helpfulness and connection.
So, pulling it all together, what's the main conclusion from this study, the big takeaway?
I think the headline is that this is really the first randomized controlled trial demonstrating that a fully generative AI therapy chatbot can be effective for treating clinical-level mental health symptoms.
For depression, anxiety, and even high risk for eating disorders.
Exactly. The results are promising across those areas, and the fact that people used it consistently and rated it highly is also very encouraging.
It certainly points towards the potential, doesn't it? Making support more scalable, maybe more personalized.
That's definitely the potential the researchers highlight. It could be a way to offer accessible mental health interventions. Of course, they also stress, and this is important, that more research is needed.
Right. Larger studies, maybe more diverse groups of people.
Precisely, to really confirm these findings and understand the nuances.
Yeah.
But it's a very strong start.
So the AI shrink, as we called it, seems to show genuine promise based on this evidence. It definitely makes you wonder. As this AI technology keeps getting more sophisticated, what other areas of well-being might benefit, beyond these specific conditions? And maybe just as importantly, what ethical guardrails do we need to think about as this field evolves so rapidly? Lots to consider.